Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate, and today we are going to be discussing the potential threat for severe weather towards the end of this week as well as the middle parts of next week. But before we get started, I'd like to take the time to ask you all to do me a favor. Go hit that like button down below, as well as subscribe if you're new, and hit notifications so that you can be up to date with all of my content that includes videos that I upload every day, or severe weather live coverage that I do on severe weather events like we did yesterday. So, to all the people who came out for that live stream, I just want to let you all know that you guys are amazing and that I actually really do appreciate all who stuck around and helped around, I should say. We had 174 people at most watching at the same time. That's pretty crazy for a YouTube channel that just got over 2,000 subscribers. So, once again, thank you all. I really do appreciate that. But enough rambling. Let's get into the Storm Prediction Center. And this right here, this day one outlook is for yesterday, or at least from the event yesterday. So it's not exactly up to date right now. But the more realistic convective outlook for today is this one. You can see the marginal risk is extended from north central parts of Oklahoma and south central parts of Kansas all the way into southern Missouri, down into southern Illinois. The risk mainly is localized as a wind and hail event. Wind is a bit more widespread in this case, according to the Storm Prediction Center, but you guys could still see some hail into parts of Missouri and Oklahoma, as well as Kansas, and a little bit of northwestern Arkansas. But otherwise, not really too strong of an event today. But the events that we are going to be looking at is the ones that are going to be coming up on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So, slight risk has been issued for parts of southwestern Oklahoma as well as the northern panhandle of Texas. The marginal extends from the Joplin, Springfield, Missouri areas all the way up into around Wichita, down towards Oklahoma City, all the way down into Lubbock. So Lubbock actually is, I believe, in the slight risk, and indeed it is. So the slight risk is just for parts of southwestern Oklahoma into the panhandle of Texas. The risks here do include a 15% chance for hail. So, oh geez, that is a large pen. But anyways, 15% chance for hail, which means that your probabilities are either 5 or 15% chance of you getting 1-inch diameter hail or larger. And then there's also the wind risk. I'm not sure. Yeah, so the wind is exactly the same. So 5% extends through near Springfield, Missouri, all the way down into close to Lubbock. But Lubbock's actually in the 15% chance for wind, which if you are in a risk for wind, whatever you see up here, that probability, well, you have that probability of getting winds over or around 58 miles per hour. So, which is right around the severe threshold. So, something to keep in mind with that. And that there is a little tornado risk here in southwestern Oklahoma, northern Texas. There is a bit of a 2% that has been issued. So, people around near Lubbock and Plainview, you guys need to monitor this storm very closely, or monitor this system very closely as it continues to move on through. This is on Friday, so it's tomorrow, and if you continue to monitor the National Weather Service as they get closer and closer, you'll be able to know what exactly could be happening. Let's take a look at day 3, and here's the day 3 outlook right here. Massive general thunderstorm risk that extends all the way over into Nebraska, but you have a marginal risk that actually goes from northern Kansas all the way down towards the border of the United States and Mexico. So this entire line of storms, this cold front that we've been watching, extends all the way down and could potentially push off into other parts like um, San Antonio, maybe later on in the evening towards the overnight hours, maybe even to the next day on Sunday. Um, this cold front pushes through into Oklahoma City, as well as Abilene and Wichita Falls. Surprisingly, well, actually, not. I shouldn't say surprisingly. It's actually right about here, ish. So, you guys could definitely see some strong gusty winds there. Maybe even some large hail. The threat for tornadoes is probably the same as it would be on Friday, if not a little bit stronger. But as of right now, it does seem to be a bit more linear, which could mean that you guys would get more of a gusty wind threat rather than tornadoes. And then the day 4 outlook here is still showing that you can get some severe storms for much of Arkansas into northwestern Louisiana, northeastern Texas, the Texarkana area, eastern Oklahoma, southeastern Kansas, and southern Missouri. So that's something to keep in mind too, that on Sunday, you guys have a 15% chance of getting severe thunderstorms, according to the Storm Prediction Center. Let's take a look at the GFS here, and we'll be able to tell as to what all is happening through the GFS just by looking at these low pressures that are marching on through. So here is the low pressure that we had last night that pushed on through and created that tornado risk into parts of Minnesota and Iowa. Although there really wasn't a tornado risk in Iowa or Wisconsin, it was just more localized into Minnesota. But there's the low pressure system, and here's its giant cold front, or should I say stationary boundary now that it's created. And you'll see as time goes along that the low pushes on through, but the rain does not. You can see the rain actually forms this giant line, and the reason why I called it a stationary boundary is because it hasn't really moved. You get more rain for the Ohio River Valley, but this boundary right here has not moved whatsoever. So you can get some rainy conditions into parts of the Ohio River Valley, maybe even some more flooding if it actually can congregate into more of the lower elevation areas. But still, regardless, this boundary is set in place, and that's the reason why you don't have as much severe storms as you typically would think you would have to see in those areas. But if we move it on through towards Friday evening, you can see right here that a new low pressure develops. You'll actually see the L in a second here. There it is. So this is the low pressure system right here. You can see this giant circle right here, and that actually is the low pressure. So we'll back it up just a bit because this is Saturday. So here's Friday evening. Here's the low pressure system. There's a little bit of moisture here on Friday evening, but it's not looking a whole too interesting, like a whole lot interesting. But you still have some moisture that seeps into the central plains, southern plains, and there could be a threat for severe weather in there. If we move on to Saturday, this is Saturday afternoon to the evening hours. There's a lot of snow in the Rockies here. There's also a lot of moisture that's kind of seeping up, especially from the Gulf of Mexico right here. So that's something to keep in mind too, that there is enough moisture from the Gulf of Mexico to kind of seep in and feed through into these general vicinities. This warm front is kind of pushing all the warm air up, and the cold front is kind of just pushing it out, using it as energy. So that's something to keep in mind as well, that you do have this classic low pressure system that is utilizing all of the conditions somewhat correctly. Then as we head into the Sunday hours, you can see that this low pressure system gets a lot more organized. Same with the cold front. So here's the low pressure system. Here's the giant cold front that swirls on through. And this is Sunday morning here. So if this line of storms maintain, then you could see a whole squall line of gusty winds that can continue to push on through into the overnight hours through parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. So that's something to keep in mind too. That um, if this holds up, then those storms could continue to wreak havoc even after the main hours of when it's actually supposed to produce tornadic weather. And then as we continue to get to the afternoon hours and into the evening hours here on Sunday, you can see the low pressure system still is producing a lot of snow into the Rockies and into parts of Nebraska, but you still have that low pressure system that it will drag out that cold front, bring out a warm front, and will advect all of the moisture out in front of the cold front so that you can get some quick spin ups along the line of the squall line so that you could see a potential tornado event um, down to the south. But we're really far away from this event. There's no models. The one I'm looking at it right now, which is 6 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. So we don't have any models that go out that far just yet, but or at least we have one, but it's a long range model, and that's the GFS here. So that's not really something to kind of keep in mind here or to look at all extensively. But let's go ahead and take a look at the central here, and we'll get into temperatures. So as they head up into this general vicinity, this is going to be Thursday evening. Some of the areas could get up into the upper 70s, maybe even 80s in Texas and southern Oklahoma. If you're along the boundary, you could see some temperatures in the 60s to maybe even 50s and 40s. So, especially if you're north of that boundary to where it's already rained. So, if you live in those areas, you could either see warm conditions or you can either see cooler conditions depending upon where you live and if you've already had rain. But then on Friday evening, the warmer temperatures start to seep up a bit more towards the north. Oklahoma starts to get into the action of the 60s and 70s temperatures, and maybe even southern parts of Kansas. They could also see some conditions like that. But then as it continues to go into Saturday, you can start to see this kind of cold front that begins to develop. So you have warm temperatures still in Oklahoma into the mid 60s, maybe even upper 60s. In Texas, it's still around the 70s. But you can kind of see this little bit of an anomaly here develop on this line. And that actually is the cold front that you'll begin to see as it pushes through on Saturday. So this is the afternoon into the evening here on Saturday. And you can see there it is. There's the cold front that develops right around 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening Central Standard Time, and it'll begin to push off with a lot of gusty winds that'll kind of just surge on through Pennsylvania into the early morning hours on Sunday. As it continues to move on through, you can see the line reaches to Tulsa at about 4 o'clock in the morning. It'll reach down into the Corpus Christi areas at about sunrise, maybe a little bit later than sunrise, but you'll get your gusty winds and stuff like that as it continues to push on through. And then the cold front continues to surge out into the Springfield, Missouri areas, closer towards the brunch time. So if you have brunch and stuff like that, I don't know who has brunch nowadays, but if you count getting a snack at like 11 o'clock as brunch, then if you and have fun with that, you might have some gusty winds at your door if you live around Fort Smith down to Springfield and maybe even near Shreveport. But then later on in the evening, then you have more warmer temperatures, especially in Louisiana, where it actually gets up into the 80s in some spots. But in other areas, it gets up to the 70s, maybe even in the 60s near Little Rock and north of that. But some of the other areas here in the Deep South, you definitely could see some warmer temperatures from this cold front right here. And then later on in the evening, you can still see the cold front continues to surge through, and that is the end of that doesn't seem to be a bit all too prevalent as it continues into Monday. But then again, we are relatively far out from the models here. Dew points. Take a look at the dew points real quickly, just from the moisture aspect. And you can see Thursday. This is Thursday evening right here. They do get up into the 60s in some spots. Well south of Oklahoma, Oklahoma City though. But much of Arkansas could see dew points up in the 60s. Same with Texas here. And as we get into Friday evening, you can see that most of Texas is already in the low to mid 60s in dew points. Oklahoma, upper 50s into lower 60s. And then as it continues to move on through, you'll see this cold front that starts to smash through on Saturday night into Sunday morning. And that cold front definitely is pushing out all that moisture and using it as energy. So that's something to keep in mind too, that this does seem to be a very much so cold front driven event with its low pressure system, and we could see some strong gusty winds there. Now I do want to take a look at I want to take a look at the a new system, or not really a new system. We said we were going to talk about it yesterday, or we were going to have someone, or someone was going to talk about it tomorrow. I love how I say someone as if there's other people on this channel. There isn't. But well, we were talking about the potential for some more severe weather even after this low pressure system. And you can see right here, there's another low pressure that develops and pushes off into the north and east. Potentially some more snow. I mean, this other low pressure system that's on Tuesday evening into Wednesday. If you live in the extreme northeast into New England, you have a chance for some isolated precip of freezing rain or snow. But there's this new low pressure system that's quite weaker than the other one was, but still a low pressure system nevertheless that'll push through the Central Plains. That could create some severe weather for Dixie Alley here. So I'll be fully anticipating that we could see some severe weather possibly by next Wednesday. So that's something to keep in mind with that. And then right as the model continues to move on through, it does seem to be a whole lot more tamer. And the main reason for that is because if we take a look at the 500 millibar wind shear real quickly, we'll be able to see here's the jet streams right here. So here's the new low pressure system that'll be pushing on through on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And this wind shear is on Thursday evening right here. So the wind shear continues to scream across the central parts of the U.S. And as it continues to move on through, here's the low pressure system that barrels in on Saturday evening into Sunday morning. It'll continue to push on through, and some of the wind shear in those instances actually gets up to around 85 knots, which is around 95 miles per hour. So the wind shear is actually pretty strong for those events too. There isn't really a lot of moisture to deal with, especially with the dew points as we saw in and around the 60s. So that's something to keep in mind too, that there isn't really a lot of moisture, but it seems to be similar than what we had last night, or similar to what we had last night, to where we had a lot of wind shear, not a lot of moisture, but yet we still had these thunderstorms that popped up and produced tornadic rotations. Maybe even a tornado. We might have had a spin up or two last night, but we don't really have enough information to say that for sure. But you can see the low pressure system kind of moves on through, and that you have another low pressure system that develops. This was on the middle part of next week on Wednesday, but it's considerably weaker than what the other ones were. So, although it does get a bit stronger as it heads in towards Dixie Alley. So this is Thursday evening. Maybe even the coast, the East Coast, maybe near Georgia and the Carolinas could get into the action with that. So that's something to keep in mind too. But I want to talk here real quickly because of how straight this jet stream is. So if you look at how the jet stream moves on through for the next week, maybe week and a half, it can determine what your jet stream will look like for a little bit, even after the model run. So as we take a look here, we can see that this jet stream is pretty straight here. It's pretty, west to east in movement, and it doesn't really move up to the north. So it's not really tilted at all. It's kind of neutrally tilted, if you know what I mean. No negative tilts, no positive tilts. I mean, it's a little bit positively tilted, but at the same time, it's not really positively tilted. It's kind of just straight. So, you can see here that it's relatively straight for the most part, but then towards the end of the model run, which if you go to the end of the model runs on any models, take it with a grain of salt. Unless if they're really like short range, so their forecast hours go up to around 84 hours. But typically if you have jet stream that stays out straight, then nothing really happens in those days. And so for the next couple of days, even after that, nothing really happens. So, that's something to keep in mind too, that severe weather may not be a thing after the events of the middle part of next week, and that the weekends might be clear of major severe weather. All right, guys. I'm trying to think of some more stuff that we could do, but I think that might be it. I do want to actually real quickly take a couple soundings in front of these events here. So I'll take a sounding right here to be able to see what exactly is happening for this is what, Friday evening. So the hodographs, just to go in a bit in depth, this is basically, if you can imagine a weather balloon being lofted up. It tracks where it goes and what the conditions are around it. So the hodograph tracks its placement as to where it goes once it gets lifted up in the air. So you can see it goes up, and then it goes to the right, it goes up and down and all around. So what the hodograph looks for is spin in the atmosphere, and whether there could be some sort of tornadic potential. And there is a bit of veering here to where that could indicate a tornadic threat, but not all too wide, not all too strong because of how small it is. So this does check out, but I agree with this possible hazard type in saying that this is a marginal tornadic sounding. Very small chance of tornadoes, which is the reason why there is a 2% chance for tornadoes that evening. CAPE at around 1,292 joules per kilogram, which CAPE stands for convective available potential energy. It's the amount of buoyant force or lift in the atmosphere that determine the amount of buoyant force and lift in the atmosphere indicated by warm air rising and cold air sinking. So that difference is indicated in CAPE, and so you would typically want to have around 750 to 2,000 joules per kilogram CAPE to even consider strong thunderstorms, or maybe even supercells, which are mature thunderstorms. So around 12,000 joules per kilogram in this event is not bad, but it's not good either, especially since your dew points are in the upper 50s into the lower 60s. Your lapse rates are decent. They're all in the 7s. This can indicate that you could get a nice little risk for hail. And helicity is lacks a bit to be desired, especially since it's below 200. Helicity is basically the difference between wind speeds at the ground and at a certain level. So surface to 1 kilometer helicity is around 120, and that's not really too good. You'd want around 200 in order for you to consider the threat for tornadoes, but it doesn't look all too strong with that. So that's Friday. You could see some hail, could see a little bit of gusty winds, probably not as much gusty winds, probably not as much tornadoes. It'd be more of a hail threat. Saturday, We'll take a look here. We'll take the sounding up here in Oklahoma, and very skinny cape. Jeez. But Hodograph looks pretty good. You have that veering. It's a lot larger than the last sounding that we were looking at. So that is a bit more concerning that there could be a larger tornado threat on Saturday evening, which is kind of what I expected, mainly because the wind shear actually is a whole lot closer to the target areas than the day prior. But the Hodograph does check out. This is a tornadic Hodograph, especially since it does veer from 0 to 1 kilometers. So you can see there's a 0 right here and there's a 1 that indicates 0 and 1 kilometers up in the sky. Temperatures in 65 degrees, dew points at 61. Helicity is at around 344, so storm relative helicity is at 282 at surface to 1 kilometers, which does bring up the possibility for some tornadic potential with that. Cape, surface cape is 701, but it is forecasted to be 1,779. So if that cape can continue to rise, then you shouldn't have any issues with producing thunderstorms in general. K-index, this is something that we look at to where the higher the number, the greater the chance for thunderstorms to develop. Typically, you would want around 30, low 30, in order for you to consider thunderstorms forming, and it's around 37. So that's something to keep in mind too. But the lapse rates here, this is kind of the issue here. The surface to 3 kilometer lapse rate, 5.8. And that's kind of not really all too good. As I mentioned, you kind of want around 7 in order for you to consider hail or even thunderstorms to kind of sustain, because this is what can determine your updrafts here, and this isn't exactly all too ideal. So maybe in Oklahoma the threat isn't as strong, but that's still something to keep in mind too. And then we'll take a sounding down here into southern Texas, and there is definitely a lot of capping here. You can see CINH, this is a limiting factor that we can look at for soundings. In order to get by, you'd want around 50 to maybe even 60, or negative 50, negative 60 joules per kilogram, but it is doubled, maybe even tripled in some spots. So there is a bit of a capping inversion or limiting factor that could prevent thunderstorms from initiating or limit it as as thunderstorms continue to move along. Oh geez, that's the end of next week. I kind of want to take a look at that after that video. That's pretty crazy. And then Sunday, as it heads into Louisiana, there is a smaller amounts of a supercell composite, so we'll take a look at that sounding. And the Hodograph does veer a little bit, but it's not as strong as the day prior. But you do have dew points in the mid-60s, so that's something to keep in mind too. But the helicity lacks a lot to be desired, and so does the K-index here. So that's something to keep in mind with all that. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for me. If you guys liked the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, as well as hit notifications so that you're up to date with all the content that I do, such as videos just like this, as well as live streams, whether it's severe weather, tropical weather, winter weather, stuff like that, that I decide, hey, I need to stream, I need to get the word out, and I need to help the general public. So if you guys like that, please be sure to click the notification bell and stay up to date. Also, share this on social media with friends and family, and go follow me on Twitch at HockeyBoy8. That would be greatly appreciated. But anyways, that's going to be it for me. My name is Nate. I also go by HockeyBoy8, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.